heavy leather on a linoleum floor, approached the door and stopped. Captain Lucas opened the door for his boss and General Aaron Miller entered the room. Lucas closed the door behind Miller. He positioned himself by the door, and another 2 soldiers stood on guard outside in the corridor. Miller looked exactly as Mark had seen him in his dream at the hotel. This confirmation of the truth of his visions was still enough to startle Mark, but it also gave him renewed confidence about his interpretation of what he was going through. "I am Aaron Miller." "Mark," said the general in a kindly tone, coming forward with an open hand that Mark shook. "I've heard a lot about you. Mark, and I think we've got a lot to talk about. May I sit down?" And so Mark met one of the few men in the world who knew as much as he did about the Soros. 20 Carrie. The sky began to cloud over a little as late afternoon eased into early evening. Carrie sat despondently cross-legged on the single bed in her room, her mobile phone obstinately uncommunicative in her lap. "Give me a ring, that's all." She muttered at it for the 10th time that day. "Where are you?" She flopped back, legs still crossed, on her bed and linked her fingers behind her head. She could hear her parents arguing with raised voices downstairs in the kitchen. "I've told you before, you cook Greek food and I want eat it. I can stand all that foreign fancy muck." Her mother, bitter, was in fine conservative mode. "Well, for God's sake. Anne, just try it." Her father, Jin, replied in exasperation. "Your taste buds are stuck in a goddamn rut. Give them an adventure, for Christ's sake. I've told you I don't know how many times. Why do you keep doing this? What do you gain by it? Look, why don't you just have a nice little martini and chill?" Carrie suspected her father dreamed up his culinary experiments which usually backfired in some awesomely catastrophic fashion specifically to irritate Bitter. If so, that aspect of his plan usually achieved outstanding success. She flung herself off the bed and paced impatiently in front of what she called her wall of shelves. Carrie's vast collection of old CDs and books were housed there, and one shelf even held some very old and fuzzy-sounding cassette tapes. The reading material showed eclectic tastes. Tolkien, Potter, Milne among the older items. Some histories of music. Campbell's latest techno-thriller, some Harris travelogues and the complete collection of Warrender. The book she had been trying to read fell to the floor, an old one. Orwell's 1984, recently serialized on ITV9, but she hardly noticed it. The quarrel entered a new phase. "I never had all these things when I was a boy, you know." "Yes, you keep reminding us. I grew up in the miners' strike with next to nothing." "Yes. Martin, you've told us. So if I want to give my family the kind of things I never had as a boy, can you blame me for that?" sobbed Whale. "Boo-hoo, oh, you insufferable, you insufferable cow. Now I know who Carrie gets it from." The hall phone downstairs buzzed its little Rolling Stones tune. Carrie's parents were great fans of the Stones. "Here comes my 19th nervous breakdown," her father answered it. Carrie had sharp hearing, but she leapt from the bed and opened her door wide for more effective eavesdropping. "Speaking, yes. What? Say that again." "Well, yes. I can hardly believe it." "You mean but my daughter she's only yes. 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 I will do that, certainly. Bye." He replaced the receiver on its charger. Carrie heard his footsteps recede on the parquet flooring. He went into the kitchen where Carrie's mother, Bitter, was, she guessed, slicing a lemon for her third aperitif. There was some subdued conversation. Then Jin called upstairs. "Carrie, come here, will you?" Her parents waited for her in the lounge. Jin was standing, her mother sitting on the sofa, her face a story of grave concern. Her father looked nervous and the perception flashed into Carrie's mind afraid. She had never considered her parents ever fell prey to emotions like fear. Such a concept was alien to their comfortable life. "I'll come straight to the point," began her father. Carrie sat on the sofa beside her mother, who took her hand protectively. Carrie could not recall such parental concern before. "What's going on, Dad? It's about that boy." Mark, instantly terror crossed Carrie's face. She tried to repeat the name, but her mouth dried up and she found she could not speak. "No, don't be alarmed. I've not heard that he's dead or even hurt. But he is in a lot of trouble." That was the police on the phone. "He's helping the police with their inquiries," the officer said, "but he seems to be all right, from what I gathered." Some bad people are after Mark, it seems, for some reason. Now, darling. Don't be upset. Her father sat beside her. And both parents placed shielding arms round their daughter's shoulders and squeezed lovingly and reassuringly, but such gestures, Carrie could not help feeling, were long unfamiliar to them. The policeman on the phone said that they were concerned that the people trying to harm Mark might come after you. Now, listen. It's going to be all right. Carrie. They re-sending someone round as a kind of guard as soon as possible. We just to sit tight. Someone will come to make sure we all right. We will be protected. Do you understand? As Carrie nodded, the doorbell sounded, a plain bell ring, and that might be the police now. You stay with Carrie, said her father. Anne nodded and hugged her daughter more tightly. Be careful. Martin. Check out the window first. Martin looked out of the lounge window into the street. Some children were playing on skateboards, the Moore family opposite were setting up a barbecue, and a Jeep with a flashing blue light was parked in the street by the driveway. Martin glanced to the side and saw a tall, fit-looking figure waiting patiently by the front porch. He had some kind of small wallet in his left hand, obviously an identity card, and when he saw Mr. Jenkins at the lounge window he held the wallet up. Martin judged it safe enough to open the door, but he kept it chained. I am a plain clothes officer. Mr. Jenkins, the man passed his identification through the gap in the door. Please check my ID. I quite understand your concern. If you want to check further you can call the number on the badge and D. Logan will confirm my physical description, but Martin was reassured, and declined to call to check further. He did not, after all, want to seem like a paranoid fool. That's all right. Come in. Martin brought the policeman into the lounge. And this is Detective Sergeant Cooper, please call me Al, said the policeman with a warm smile. This is my wife, Anne, and my daughter, Carrie. The policeman's eyes rested on Carrie for a moment. Pleased to meet you all, and I only wish it could have been in different circumstances. Well, if you ready, we'll be off, Martin frowned. What do you mean? The officer looked puzzled. You mean they didn't make it clear? Oh, I am sorry. You were supposed to be told to come into protective custody. I am to take you to Sterling HQ where you'll be totally safe. Your safety is our prime concern, obviously, yes. I accept that, said Martin, but, oh don't argue. Martin chided his wife. The police will know best. Will we need to get some things together? The policeman nodded. Yes, just a few overnight things, I'll see to it, said Carrie's mother. Martin, will you switch off the cooker? Just throw that stuff in the bin or fridge for later. Carrie, come and get your things. Come on. Yes, Mum. Carrie did not trust this policeman. There was just something about him. She wondered if Mark's hunches felt anything like this, a sensation of something just not being right accompanied by rising unease. She filled a little Samsonite bag with pants and toiletries, and slipped her mobile into her jeans pocket. Her mother met her in the upstairs landing and they descended together to find the policeman standing by the open door. Where's Dad? The policeman gestured towards the kitchen. He's just finishing up in there. He'll be out in a minute. We'll just get safely into the car. He reached out take their bags as they reached the bottom step. On you go. Carrie. I'll just hurry your father along. No, that's not necessary. Mrs. Jenkins, really let us just get to the car. He'll catch us up in a sec. Come on, we're short on time. Carrie somehow found herself being escorted down the driveway while her mother followed. The policeman carried both bags in one hand. Carrie spotted Alicia Wotherspoon coming down the street carrying a viola case, heading for her house next door to Carrie's. Alicia returning from a music lesson, she vaguely thought. Alicia was also a fan of 80s music. Carrie gave her a wave, then asked the policeman. What did you say your name was? Cooper. He opened the passenger door for Carrie. You get to ride in front, Carrie. Mr. Cooper. I'll just run back and make sure Martin turns on the burglar alarm. You know what he's like, darling. 2 seconds. Before the policeman could reply, Anne was hurrying back up the drive and had entered the house. He closed the passenger door and walked round to the driver's side. He put the bags into the back seat space. He got in and turned the key in the ignition. What did you say your first name was? Asked Carrie. Al. The policeman glanced past her at the house. His hand slipped to the handbrake and gently disengaged it. I am a great fan of 80s music. Al, and did you know school's out for summer? With sudden fury, Carrie frantically tried to open the passenger door, but found it locked. At the same moment Anne came running to the door, an expression of wild panic on her face. Carrie, get out of the car. P.S. The engine revved and the Jeep pulled away, blue light still flashing as if in mockery. Anne Jenkins impotently watched her daughter being driven away. She saw Carrie's hands bang on the car windows, and dimly heard her screams. Carrie was just about to turn round to start kicking and scratching her abductor when she felt a painful jab in her right shoulder. Almost at once the arm lost all feeling and the drug spread quickly through her system. In seconds the fight went out of her, and a few moments more, hardly before the Jeep turned the corner out of her street, she was unconscious, slumped against the passenger door. Anne Jenkins stood shouting her daughter's name, until the Moore family across the road became alarmed and started to appear round the side of their house to find out what was wrong. The kids had stopped their skateboarding. Alicia had dropped her viola case and stood open-mouthed in astonishment. Abruptly Anne turned and ran back into the kitchen where her husband lay insensible on the parquet flooring bleeding from a head wound. With the unconscious girl collapsed in the seat beside him, Henderson turned Logan's vehicle into Sterling Boulevard and began to accelerate towards the castle in the distance. The witnesses, Alicia, the Moores, the skateboarders, suddenly roused themselves from their stunned immobility and ran in their several directions to summon assistance or provide what help they could to the screaming mother. 21 Magic. Aaron Miller had the kind of open, knowledgeable face that inspired confidence and trust. Mark found himself responding to the General's manner. It was difficult to conceive that this man with his easy way and informal tone was one of the most important men in Britain. He sat in one of the easy chairs opposite Mark, while Robert sat on the edge of the bed. Mark. I am going to record what we say here, if you don't mind, Mark shrugged. That's okay, he said. Thank you. Miller gestured to Lucas, who touched a small circle on his lapel. Mark knew without being told that this was miniature camera and the signal was being transmitted to and recorded in another location. Now, first let me tell you that I am sorry about your mother. We moving heaven and earth to find her. We have MI5 working with the sis and you can rest assured, it's all right. Said Mark. My mum will be all right. Miller raised his eyebrows. How do you know that? Mark ran a hand through his hair. I am not 100% sure yet about a lot of things, but I just know some stuff. I've always had hunches and feelings, but this is more. I know. Is it anything to do with the dreams you've been having? Asked Roberts, and in answer to Mark's inquiring glance, added. I read the notes you made at the Bridge of Orkney Hotel. I've mentioned them to General Miller, that's why I am interested in you. Mark, said Miller, is it through dreams you get your knowledge? No, some I am not entirely sure. But I know my mother will be all right. It's me they after. Who? The Human Freedom League? Asked Miller. No, not them. Replied Mark, the Soros. You know that's who I meant. The general nodded and leaned back in his chair. You realize the significance of what you suggesting? No. I don't know what it means. But they replaying some kind of game with me. There's more to it than you think. Again Miller raised an inquisitive eyebrow. Oh, after a moment of silence, in which Mark looked down at the table between them, he added. What? Mark regarded the general levelly for a second. You know the Soros have another ship, don't you? What do you know about that? Miller's smile stayed in place but all warmth went right out of it. It's located somewhere over the North Pole, said Mark. It's interfering with satellites. Miller exchanged a worried glance with Roberts. That's very interesting. Mark, there was absolutely no way this 15-year-old could know anything about this. Even Roberts didn't know. Mark said nothing. He looked at the surface of the table. Teak formica. Plastic. He recalled a physics lesson from school, his third year. Something to do with cohesion. How had old McAllister described it? The forces within the molecules that hold a thing together, the force of attraction between adjacent particles in the same body. Miller leaned forward encouragingly. What do you think is going on? Mark began to wonder, but he did not reply. He seemed to be paying no attention at all to the question. Miller went on. The Soros suggested to me that there was some kind of terrorist link, and I know about your father, the force of attraction, thought Mark. He placed his hand flat on the table. But I think we can rule out any real terrorist connection there. That was all a long time ago, after all. And what with the accident? If I just push, Mark pushed his hand on the surface of the table. Nothing happened. The general sat back. Mark, if you don't mind, can we just go over a few facts? I like to go step by step. If I've got it right, you and your mother were in your mother's surgery at 9 o'clock yesterday morning, yes? I was in my mother's surgery at 9 in the morning. What were you doing there? Mark knew now what he had to do. She was examining me. What for? I have something growing in my head. Miller and Roberts started forward. What did you say? Snapped Miller. Something in my head. And it's causing me all sorts of problems. Mark was aware of his heart thudding nervously. For instance, you can rely on mobile phones when I am around, and if I've managed to get my mind around it now, the most surprising thing is, it allows me to do this. He pushed and his hand passed soundlessly, effortlessly through the tabletop. Roberts, who had stood up, now stepped back, sitting back down on the bed. Jesus Christ, Aaron Miller simply blinked in disbelief at what Mark had done. Mark withdrew his hand. He held it up, examined it, flexed it. Well, that was really quite easy. Then he sat back and let nature, or rather human nature, take its course. The video recorder had captured the whole thing. There was evidence for what he had just done. Asterisk 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 asterisk. Neither Roberts nor Miller was sure what to do next. There were no laid-down procedures for what to do in circumstances like these. A kid passes his hand through solid matter. What the hell can you say? They examined the table, of course, banging it and tapping it and turning it over. They examined Mark's hand, and when they asked him to, he did it again. Effortlessly, without noise or drama of any kind, his hand passed through the table. Finally Miller said, Mark, this has to be studied. You have to be in a safe place. It might be because of this ability you appear to be developing that people are trying to kill you. Maybe you re some kind of threat to them. In any case, we have to get you to a secure place. Can I suggest you come with me back to command at Stirling Castle? I guarantee it's the safest place in Scotland. Mark's eyes seemed to gaze beyond Miller for a second. The general had the uneasy feeling that something was happening right behind him, but only Mark could see it. Mark's eyes focused again. Yes, let us get to Stirling. We have to go now. Things are happening and I need to go to Stirling. There was a growing urgency in his voice that also worried Miller. What is it? I'll explain on the way. We have to go now. It was the work of moments to grab his few belongings, and for the general to usher him out of the building to the waiting small convoy of fast Jaguars. As they descended to the car park, Roberts suggested that his part should be to return to SIS HQ and carry on with the investigation into the leads they had. The chip from the killer's broken mobile phone might yield up some interesting addresses and supernet links, he said, and they had still to trace that helicopter. Miller agreed, and the men parted with assurances of staying in regular contact over the next couple of days. They would keep each other fully informed of whatever turned up. Goodbye, Mark, said Roberts. He held out his hand, then hesitated. Is it safe to shake hands with you? Mark smiled and took the inspector's hand. See. No problem. But, he said, releasing the hand. You should go home. You about worn out. And don't worry, Sally's all right now. As the Jaguars sped off towards the motorway access ramp, Roberts stood for a while. He was too astonished to move and began to feel nausea creeping over him, a reaction to the strain he had been under and the bewildering events he had just witnessed. But already he was beginning to wonder if what he had heard and seen had actually happened. Then reality in the form of his mobile made its presence known, and a voice told him that Carrie Jenkins had been kidnapped, her father was being treated for a head wound in hospital, and her mother was utterly distraught. His weariness and feeling of sickness intensified. Asterisk 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 asterisk. 22 Ambush. The first Jaguar was the Pioneer car, containing 4 Secret Service personnel who kept in constant contact with home base, which, for the Soros liaison commander, was situated in Allied Command Headquarters in Stirling Castle, although that was not public knowledge. The Liaison Committee's public face was presented by a specially built set of buildings adjacent to McIntyre's field. But the true headquarters, to which Miller now intended to take Mark, was situated deep within the hard volcanic rock that had propped up Stirling Castle for hundreds of years. The second car contained the general himself, and his aide. Captain John Lucas drove. An SAS bodyguard occupied the front passenger seat and the general sat in the back. Mark also sat in the back, on the general's left. The third car brought up the rear and its men, also seconded from the SAS, kept some pretty heavy weaponry for use in the event of an ambush. There had been threats. Ever since the Soros ship had landed on Earth, there had been threats to anyone connected with the aliens. They arrived by letter, by phone, on the net, usually 2 or 3 a month. The most frequent source was, of course, the Human Freedom League, and their stated aims were to oppose any dealings with the Soros whatsoever, for they claimed that the aliens' sole intention was world domination and the extermination of the human race. The League were clever. So far they had eluded capture, even on the Supernet, which was pretty hard to do. All leads ended up blind alleys. The Supernet boffins at the Ministry of Defense and the Criminal Intelligence Service tore their hair out trying to unravel the complex weave of trails the League created on the net every time they sent a message. But so far the threats had been without substance. The little convoy sped along the M80, the main route north out of Glasgow towards the Central Belt. Elsewhere even bigger wheels were turning, for Miller had been busy on the phone. He had passed the suspicion that the Soros might be up to something on to his immediate superior, the General Officer commanding Scotland. Andrew Talbot, who in turn alerted the head of NATO, and the U.S. Defense Commander. General Locke. British armed forces were placed on status Bikini Gamma Green, military code for Red Alert. The cars were speeding past the Bishopbriggs off-ramp before Miller had finished his calls. Traffic was light at 6 o'clock this early Monday evening. The Prime Minister will be informed, of course, General Miller was saying. I am relieved you retaking this all so seriously. Admitted Mark, I was quite worried you'd treat me as a crank. Miller smiled, a hard, thin crease in his rugged face. I thought you were, at first who wouldn't he? You have to be skeptical in our position. But a number of things had already disposed me to give you a hearing with an open mind. I am not a stupid man. I wouldn't have been appointed to my job if I couldn't interpret little details. When the Soros told me about you, it didn't sound quite right. It struck me as curious that the Soros would be so interested in a 15-year-old boy and his mother. But I've had doubts for a while. We all have, who have had any dealings with them. They never let us see them face to face, for instance. We still don't know what they look like. That is not the behavior of a trusting species. They could, you see, have simply showed us pictures. The presence of another ship has long been suspected. It occurred to us at an early stage that the ship called the Museum would be too small to convey a group of Soros across the galaxy. How could it contain enough fuel, supplies and so on? No, there had to be another, more powerful ship, and the one we know about was just a landing craft. We've been worried for a long time about that. It had not escaped our notice either that some of our satellites were not behaving quite as they should. There were other, even sillier, things that made me wonder sometimes. For example, not far from where they landed a little burn comes down off the hills. It's called the Burn of Sorrows. I wondered if they had simply pinched that name from a map and were, as you say, playing some kind of game with us all. So, no Mark. I could not dismiss you as a crank, and after what I've seen today, with your little magical act. Mark nodded. Lucas interrupted abruptly. Something up ahead, sir. He was gesturing to the motorway verge just ahead of them and to the left. He immediately began issuing commands into his lapel radio. They were approaching the ramp that led off the motorway and into the small backroads and little commuter towns dotting the countryside northeast of Glasgow. The SAS man instantly had an automatic pistol in his hand. Before Mark could make out what was happening up ahead, suddenly the bonnet of the car in front was rising up. The ground was erupting beneath it. Mark saw the first car seem to fly up and backwards into the air. Then the General's car passed under the first car, and was engulfed in smoke as its suspension struggled to carry it over the destroyed road surface. The leading car was about to land on them. Captain Lucas ducked instinctively as they narrowly missed being crushed by it as it crashed to earth and exploded in gouts of flame only a meter or so behind them. But the ground was too churned up, the tarmac had been smashed and it was raining down on them. Great chunks battered the armored roof, and sent splinter lines along the bullet-proof glass of the windows. The back seat passengers automatically covered their heads. Lucas fought for control but could not avoid the pit in the motorway and the Jaguar smashed to a halt. Airbags exploded from several points and, once the car was motionless, quickly subsided. The second bodyguard turned to the general. "Keep down, sir. Seems they've got a rocket launcher," he said. He looked across at Captain Lucas. Lucas nodded to him. "Let us go," said the bodyguard. "General, you and the boy stay put." Lucas and the bodyguard opened their side doors simultaneously, pushing the limp remains of the airbags away, guns at the ready. The smoke was clearing. The car behind had swerved to a stop just behind. Beyond, cars behind it were slowing and coming to a halt. Secret Service men were pointing guns at the 20-foot grass verge. One was emerging from the back seat with a particularly lethal-looking piece of kit, a state-of-the-art laser-sighted thermal rifle. "We in good hands," said the general. "We'll let the men do their job. It's what they trained for and they very, very good, especially Lucas. We'll soon be out of here." Mark was too surprised and scared to reply, and hunched up in the corner of his seat. Gunfire sounded outside. Then a second explosion rocked the car on its springs and threatened to turn it right over. Both were sent flying into one corner. The general swore viciously and Mark cried out as he was crushed under the impact. Then the car righted itself again with a sickening bang. Something else hit the car. A red smear appeared on the side window. Mark did not see it, but Miller's eyes widened a little in shock. He carried a pistol in a holster at his side. He undid the fastener now and took out the weapon. Debris struck the roof again, and there was the sound of gunfire mixed with shouting, unidentifiable voices. Somebody yelled out and there was another huge explosion. The Jaguar this time jolted forward. More smoke, then it cleared slightly, and cars were burning now, the terrible acrid smell choking and disorientating. The general peered out of the window, and Mark peered over his shoulder. He knew Lucas was dead. A tall figure was approaching the car. It held some kind of long cylinder in its hand. The figure wore a black suit and dark glasses. It was Johns raising the rocket launcher. Miller raised his pistol but was jostled as Mark pushed to the window. Johns saw Mark's wild white face appear at the window beside the face of the traitor. Miller. The young face took him by surprise. He had not expected to see the boy here. The boy's face also registered recognition. A momentary feeling of enormous doubt surged through Johns. But it was too late. His finger had pressed the electronic firing button. The rocket launcher flared, and there was a sound like the air was being ripped apart, but no rocket left the device. A ball of searing yellow flame issued from the launcher's tip and suddenly swallowed Johns. The explosion jolted the Jaguar. Mark opened his eyes and saw that nothing remained where the attacker had stood. Misfire, thought the general, 1,000,000 to 1 chance. The general was aware of someone shouting beside him. "Oh my God! Oh my God!" A long, drawn-out wail. It was Mark, recoiling from what he himself had caused. General Miller took control. He undid seat belts and tried to force open the doors, but they were jammed tight, the door panels buckled into place. "Give me room, Mark. I have to kick the door open," he yelled. Then Mark seemed to come to himself. "Right," he said. And he took control. He touched the door, imagined what he wanted it to do, and it not only opened, it flew away from the car, as if torn from its hinges by some enormous invisible giant and tossed away as if it were no heavier than tinfoil. Somehow they managed to struggle out of the battered Jaguar. Smoke from the burning cars swirled around them, and the stink of it filled their nostrils. Holding their breath, they staggered towards the raised verge. Here they could breathe and look back on the wreckage. The bodies on the motorway were unrecognizable. Mark had to look away. He was filled with horror at what he had seen happen to Johns, and he knew with absolute clarity that he himself had caused the rocket launcher to explode. The confidence he had found on waking up in the hospital earlier that day, and which had strengthened when he tried his newfound power, evaporated away now like mist off a meadow. People were emerging from cars further down the motorway and on the opposite side. Some, with more presence of mind than curiosity, perhaps, were trying to use their mobile phones to call the police, fire, ambulance. Mark saw them put their phones to their ears, then shake them and look at them, frowns on faces. Of the people in the 3 cars, however, none except Mark and General Miller remained alive. Mark was in the grip of fear, so much adrenaline was pumping through his system he could hardly stand upright. He was conscious now of a rushing sound in his ears, and the sounds of vehicle horns and shouting voices were muffled. Others now arrived on the scene.